Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Convention of States, Indiana Live. Let me ask you a question. Do you think we still have a big problem with our federal government in Washington, D.C.? Well, if you do, stay tuned because we at Convention of States have a solution as big as the problem. Well, welcome everyone. Once again, my name is Dale Parrish. I'm the State Director for Convention of States here in Indiana. And I want to welcome you to our broadcast this evening. Kind of give you a little rundown on what we're going to be doing. We typically have 3 segments to our broadcast. The first segment will be a discussion period. The second segment will be just some general information about Convention of States here in Indiana. And then the third segment will be having to do with the basics of Convention of States. These are the tenets that we in Convention of States believe in and follow, which is really directed toward new people that that are not involved with us as yet, that maybe are interested in learning more about Convention of States. Obviously, it's available for anyone who's interested in this kind of information. Now, I want to back up to this first segment because tonight we're going to have Paul Phillips back on with us this evening, our legislative liaison. And Paul is going to be leading a discussion on socialism or capitalism. This is going to be very interesting. I think you're going to really like this. This is based on one of his latest podcasts entitled Freedomism, and you'll learn more about what that means as well in the discussion. Now, before we get to that first segment, I want to issue my standard warning, and that is if your screen goes blank or freezes up, please just consider that we've encountered a technical problem, which has happened before. And if that does happen, don't stay around and wait for us to come back on, because we're not going to be coming back. It just takes too long to get everything up and running again. So in case that happens, please just put us on your calendar for next Monday evening at 7 p.m. and join us at that time. Okay, well, let me bring Paul into the broadcast, and we'll get started. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Dale. How are you tonight?
Good, good. Glad to have you, my man.
Glad to be here.
Always enjoy Paul. We always seem to have very good discussions when Paul's on. And so, Paul, we're going to talk tonight about socialism or capitalism. So you want to get us started with on that topic?
Sure. And as anybody who's been following the news now knows, that's now a big question, and there seems to be a significant amount of people who feel that socialism might be a good alternative for us, or even democratic socialism. And so I wanted to go a little deeper into those terms. Actually, and I have to actually say democratic socialism, that term bothers me more than just socialism by itself, because democratic socialism is combining 2 bad things. With a democracy, you can have a tyranny of the majority, and with socialism, you can have the government running anything. And to me, the real danger there is, I've heard it said that you can vote your way into socialism, but then you'll have to shoot your way out. So,
do you think the term democratic socialism is just it's a term just to make it a little more attractive to voters?
Yeah, to kind of pretty it up.
Okay.
But I think that's this socialism versus capitalism is a false dichotomy, meaning giving you two inaccurate or bad choices. And I think the real solution is what I like to call freedomism, which we'll define that a bit more a little bit later. But where this kind of starts with maybe some definitions. So socialism is defined by Wikipedia as a system of government where the state owns the means of production or businesses. And there are some other related ideologies, I guess. I would call communism a close cousin, if not an identical twin sister of socialism. And fascism is another one.
Go ahead and throw those up here too. So
yeah, where basically all three of those are different names for the same thing, what I would call statism. And that's a belief where you rely on the government to meet all your needs, control things, control the means of production. And this idea of socialism versus capitalism really comes from the philosophy and writing of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And capitalism is Marx's kind of straw man of everything that he saw that was wrong with the world, where the world, as in his mind, was controlled by basically business owners or the people who own the capital, the factories, the machinery, and so on. And he saw the world as a struggle between the capitalists and the workers. And so when you're talking socialism versus capitalism, it kind of mirrors that. And personally, I'm a little disappointed by the reaction or response of more free market thinking type people, is just to accept the label of capitalism and own it, and really in their mind be talking about a free market and all the good that it's done, and just be willing to do that under the label of capitalism. But what it really, to me, comes down to is the central idea of governance for a nation. And I like this quote from Abraham Lincoln. He said, "Every nation has a central idea from which all its minor thoughts radiate." And so in my mind, what is the central thought of America? Or, I like the term, what is the uniquely American theory of government? And I get that title from a paper that was written by Randy Barnett, a constitutional scholar at Georgetown University. And he talked about the American theory of government is defined in our Declaration of Independence.
Now, most people, when you talk about the central idea, most people would think the Constitution is what would define that.
Right, but really the Declaration of Independence defines it. The Constitution implements it. Might be the way to look at it. But so this central theory of American government would read like this, and this probably sounds familiar. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it." Now, that's a mouthful. That's a lot in really a short couple of sentences. But to me, there are five really important key characteristics here of this American theory of government, or what I would call a belief in freedomism. And those five things are: first, first come rights, then come government. So we don't get our rights from government. We get our rights from our creator, is what the Declaration says. And then the second thing is we're all created equal. And actually, I like the phrase in the Virginia Declaration of Rights, which was a source document that Jefferson used. It said we are all created equally free, meaning equal rights. We obviously aren't created with equal abilities.
Right.
Or else I'd be playing in the NBA right next to LeBron James. But we're all created with equal rights. And number three is we can't give up these rights. They're unalienable. And the government can't take them away. And here's one of the key things for me in here. It tells us what the purpose of government is. Governments are instituted to secure these rights. So the real role of government is to protect our rights, not to feed us and to clothe us and to provide medical care.
That is a widely misunderstood concept, isn't it?
Right. And then the final thing is, if the government is destructive to these ends, or if it's not protecting our rights, the people have the right to alter it or abolish it. And that's really meaningful to me, being part of the Convention of States project, because Article 5 is the means that has been given to us in the Constitution to alter the government or fix the errors that may appear in the Constitution, as the founders would have said it.
That's right.
You know, I mentioned at the start that instead of the question being socialism or capitalism, I think the question is statism, or what I call freedomism, and which is this American theory of government outlined in the Declaration of Independence. And at least for me, I would certainly choose freedomism over socialism.
Right. Well, excellent. I think it's the Declaration of Independence is. You've really opened my eyes to this with this podcast, and of course this discussion this evening. That there's so much material in the Declaration of Independence. You would think the longer document, being the Constitution, would be where all the material would be, but it's really packed into that Declaration of Independence.
Right.
It's very, very good. Very good. All right, Paul. Let me see if I've got any questions here. Don't have no one's submitted any questions at this point in time.
That must mean I was perfectly clear and understandable in my explanation, right?
Well, we'll let you go that way, yes, if you want. All right, Paul. Well, thank you very much, Paul. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Dale.
All right. Well, let me bring up here my PowerPoint so we can get to the other two segments. I hope you enjoyed that discussion that Paul led on socialism or capitalism. I thought that was very, very, very interesting, and I really let me get rid of that agenda item that's still on there. And there it goes. Okay. All right. Now, I'll bring up the PowerPoint, and I want to make sure that that's visible by everyone. And we'll get the slideshow option going here, so everyone can see clearly what we're. There we go. Everyone can see what we're talking about here. All right, let's get in now to some general information about what's happening here in the state of Indiana. We have various resources available to us here in Indiana. The main resource available to us is the national website, Convention of States website, which is conventionofstates.com. There's a wealth of information in that website, and we use it as a tool here in Convention of States in Indiana. And you'll hear us make reference to this website from time to time. Now, embedded in the national website is our state website page, conventionofstates.com/Indiana. That, of course, is a more focused look on the state of Indiana. Social media platforms, we're on numerous platforms. We're on Facebook. We have a state Facebook page, Convention of States Indiana, which this broadcast is coming to you through that Facebook page tonight. We're also on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, COS Indiana. Now, this YouTube channel is very much an educational resource. We have narrated PowerPoint presentations on there, recordings of these broadcasts, and also Paul's podcasts are also all linked to the YouTube channel. And his podcast is called The Free to Be Free. So, like I said, we have a link to each of his podcasts on the YouTube channel. So feel free to go to that channel, subscribe, and feel free to utilize that information however you desire. We're on Twitter, hashtag COS Indiana, on Instagram, Convention of States Indiana. We're also on LinkedIn, and we're looking at going on other social media platforms. I believe we also have an account on Instagram, as a matter of fact. So we're out there. You should be able to find us. Just some numbers for you for Convention of States Indiana. In 2018, we surpassed 30,000 supporters. Been growing tremendously here in Indiana, been growing at about a 40% rate. So given that growth rate, we've set 40,000 supporters as our goal in 2019, and we're well on our way to achieving that goal. About 2,900 volunteers. These are individuals that have indicated a willingness to help out if needed. We have about 40 individuals in leadership positions. Now, if you're interested at all in getting involved in Convention of States and want to get maybe more involved, I would encourage you, here's this website again, I would encourage you to go to conventionofstates.com, our national website, click on the menu selection, take action, scroll down and look at the various volunteer opportunities we have. If one's of interest to you, open it up, read about it. And if you're very interested, go ahead and make application. You're not obligated in any way. But by making application, then your name will come up on a report that I and a few others see every day. So one of us will then get in contact with you to further discuss your particular area of interest. So we always need people in leadership positions. So if you're interested at all, I encourage you to take this step. All right. Let's get now into the basics of Convention of States. And the basics involve what we see as the problem, the solution, and the plan. What's the problem? Well, the problem we see is that our elected officials in Washington, D.C. lack the will and the courage to address certain basic structural issues in our federal government. No one political party is responsible for this. Both parties have contributed to this problem, and it's been going on for decades. It's not a current thing. It's been going on for decades. Now, in the problem, we have identified 3 abuses that we believe, abuses by the federal government, that need to be addressed. The first one is our national debt. Our national debt, if you follow this at all, is over $22 trillion now. Very little to nothing is being done to address this problem, and it continues to grow and grow. So steps need to be taken, we believe, to address this problem of our national debt. Unfunded liabilities, I've heard numbers such as $250 trillion. So but our national debt needs to be addressed. The second abuse that we see has to do with the regulatory crisis in our country. As we know, the administrative state has become known as the fourth branch of government. So yes, I know the current administration's been eliminating some regulations, but much more needs to be done in this area, not only in eliminating regulations, but to control the process in which these regulations are created. The last abuse that we see has to do with state sovereignty. This involves power and money, and see, when our country was founded, there was a concept called dual federalism in place, where the federal government and the states would share power. Well, that has all tilted toward the federal government. So, like I said, this involves power and money, and we believe the career politician plays a role in this. So this is the third area, the abuse by the federal government that we think needs to be addressed. Well, what's our solution to this problem? Our solution is we believe, to call a convention of states for the purpose of amending the Constitution to address the abuses that we just outlined. Now, in Article 5, there are two methods of amending the Constitution that are described in Article 5. Let's touch briefly on each method. The first method is the method that we're used to know, and that's where 2/3 of Congress would propose an amendment or amendments, and then those proposed amendments would have to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures, which would be 38 states. Okay? Well, there is a second method described in Article 5. It's never been used, and that is where 2/3 of the state legislatures apply to conduct a convention of states for the purpose of amending the Constitution. Any amendments then that would come out of that convention, just like in Method 1, would then have to be ratified by 3/4 of the states, or 38 states, as I said, just like in Method 1. So that's what we're all about, is we want to see this convention of states take place. Well, what's our plan? What's our plan to bring this about? Our plan is in two parts. The first part is what we refer to as the application strategy. You remember I said 34 states have to make application. It's also referred to as the resolution, but they have to make application to hold this convention. Well, those applications all have to be the same. That's called aggregation. They all have to be the same. So what we have done in Convention of States is we've literally designed the application form that we want each state to use. And in that application, in the subject matter of the application, which determines the agenda of the convention, we've outlined 3 areas that we want the convention to address. Number 1 is fiscal restraints. Number 2 is limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. And the third area is term limits. And those are the areas that we want the convention to focus on and propose amendments in those areas that would then address the abuses that we outlined earlier in the problem section. Now, the second part of the plan is to mobilize the grassroots, and that's mobilizing you, me, and our state legislators. Mobilizing the grassroots to bring about this convention. And we're well on our way. We need to get to 34 states. We have 15 states that have passed this application. Yes, Indiana is one of those states. We were the 6th state to pass the application. So the momentum is growing. We're moving, and we're going to make this happen. We're in all 50 states. We're all across the country. I mentioned we have over 30,000 supporters here in Indiana. We have over 3.9 million nationally. So our number of supporters is continuing to grow, and we would love to have your participation in getting involved in Convention of States to make this happen. All right, let's go back now, and we'll kind of wrap things up here. I do want to mention that on our next broadcast, which will be on August 26th, we're going to have one of our district captains join us that evening. His name is Larry Wee, and Larry is, as I said, is a district captain down in the Franklin County area, and Larry's going to lead a discussion on amendment ideas. And I think we're going to be focusing on fiscal restraints in that area, but and limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. So Larry's going to come on and talk to us about some amendment ideas for the convention. Okay. All right, let's. I want to recognize some individuals that have joined us this evening, and first one, Kevin Gray. Kevin, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. Keith Lickens. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Lickens. Okay, thank you, Kevin. Keith, I should say, thank you for this evening, coming with us this evening. I see George Ward is with us. George is our grassroots coordinator here in Convention of States, key person in our organization here. And let me see here. I've also got Jerry Rowe again with us this evening, and Jerry is one of our state systems information analysts, and another very key person in our organization. So everyone, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I think I saw another individual come in, Dustin Hernan. Thank you, Dustin Heron. Excuse me. Thank you. I saw Courtney Love was on earlier. Courtney is one of our co-district captains. So Courtney, thank you for joining us this evening too. All right, let's wrap things up this evening. And I always like to wrap things up with one of my favorite quotes. And this is a quote that comes to us from one of our founders, of Convention of State founders, and that is Mr. Mark Meckler. And Mark says that, there is a fundamental question facing our country today. And the question is not, what should we do? The question is, who will decide? So basically, the question facing us is a two-word question. Very simply, who will decide? And we think in Convention of States, we think we, the people, should have a greater say-so in who decides and what is decided in our country. So, folks, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening, and please put us on your calendar for next Monday evening. As I said, we're going to have another one of our district captains join us, Larry Wee. We're going to talk about some amendment ideas, so it ought to be an interesting evening. So thank you all for joining us, and have a good evening. Good night, everyone.